Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2 for the fourth instalment of the Platoon Patrol series. This time we're taking some Syrian Mechanized Infantry out in BMP 1Ps. As platoons go, this is definitely on the more limited side. Whether or not Soviet-style motor rifle platoons like this are supposed to even operate independently is a serious question, compounded by some highly vulnerable vehicles and relatively limited firepower. In our platoon patrol scenario, they're up against a reinforced squad of US Marines who are defending one of 5 locations. I rolled up entry point 1 this time, so we're starting off where the highway leaves the map on the north edge. This takes us into an area we haven't really visited before. Up here in this corner we got some rolling high ground broken up by woods and separated from the more agricultural areas on the right by a deep stream valley. As long as we stick to the left, we'll have plenty of room to manoeuvre and some relatively long fields of fire. Most conspicuously though, entry point 1 is overlooked by objective Bravo. This is the only potentially defended location that isn't a farm. It's a wooded hilltop, and because it's only 500 meters away, any Marine small teams on this side of the slope could easily start popping off rockets. So the first order of business is to push the entire platoon left into some dead ground, kick out the squad and send them forward to try and get eyes on that hill. After a few turns eyeballing Bravo from afar, there are no visible targets on the facing slope. Remounting and closing the distance to the entire platoon via some patches of dead ground draws no fire. A scout team from 2nd Squad moves into the woods and touches the objective to confirm that Bravo is clear. The rest of 2nd join the scouts on the summit to give the squad leader a few turns worth of observation with his binoculars, but again they don't see anything. From here I have access to Alpha, Charlie and Echo. Alpha is a fair way away on the other side of the stream with plenty of dense terrain directly in the way of the platoon, so I'm not inclined to go in that direction right now. Charlie is also on the other bank, but it's much more accessible, being right alongside the north-south highway. That same highway leads straight down to Echo. I don't particularly want to use the highway to advance though. It's not only pretty obvious, but it takes me right into the middle of some woods near Charlie that may be occupied, and the approach to Echo is pretty open and exposed. There is a track that runs around the base of Bravo towards Echo though. This would conveniently take me very close to Charlie, so I decided to use that to move up. There's some rough terrain on the direct approaches to both objectives from this direction, including a small stream. The track bypasses that via a bridge in an area which is pretty well masked. The immediate plan then is to cross the bridge, probe Charlie via the woods next to the highway, and if that objective is clear, move on towards Echo. The platoon moves forward without any problems and spreads out on the far side of the bridge. There's been no fire from the Charlie woods, which is a good sign, so I leave 1st and 2nd in position in the little bridgehead and send 3rd forward via some more dead ground to investigate. The squad dismounts and heads around the left side of the woods to get a better view on the Charlie compound. This is a little risky. It's not impossible that I might stumble on the enemy at close range here and have a bad day. There really isn't a good way around that problem when approaching from this angle due to the terrain. But I've split a 2-man scout team off on 3rd to lead the way and hopefully trigger any ambushes before the main body of the squad is at risk. To my surprise, 3rd scouts crest a small rise and find themselves staring into the backs of the enemy platoon HQ among some trees next to the highway. They immediately open fire and start chucking grenades at them. So we've made contact. The enemy is at Charlie, and in a double first for the Platoon Patrol series, we've not only initiated that contact, but at very close range, only about 30 meters. It's not clear how fast the Marines will recover from getting bumped in the back like this. They're higher quality troops than the blue platoons in this scenario, but they're also at a bit of a disadvantage here. The rest of 3rd Squad is only just behind the scouts, so I think the first thing I need to do is push them up and try to overwhelm this single enemy team before they can react. There will be more Marines out there though. Whether or not they'll be able to counter and the firefight will develop will depend entirely on how they've been distributed throughout the immediate area. Regardless, the dismounts of 3rd Squad are basically fixed and committed right now. Their BMP is in dead ground a little behind them. 1st and 2nd are still mounted back near the bridge. None of the BMPs currently have line of sight onto the enemy. Obviously I need to find a way to get the rest of the platoon into the fight. I think we can safely say the edge of the wood on my right is clear, seeing as though 3rd's BMP is parked up next to it without exploding, but it's a very lumpy wood. There could easily be more marine teams deeper within that I just can't see. Bringing 1st and 2nd online with 3rd on the right would basically involve rolling into an unprobed area of dense terrain and hoping for the best. The BMPs can't support from a distance due to the ground, so just sending the dismounts in means cutting the IFVs out of the fight. Trying to go left, we have a big chunk of open ground. Again, it's pretty lumpy, so there's some cover for the rest of the platoon, but heading that way means entering the field of fire of any Marines actually in the Charlie compound itself. The rooftops in particular are likely locations for the small teams, according to the AI plan. There would be more range to play with, though if the dismounts get involved they'd likely be at a severe disadvantage facing down all those Marine ACOGs with their iron-sighted AKMs. Of course, if we're talking about engaging from range, I'm not 100% committed here. I could disengage right now, pull back to the summit of Bravo and fire all of the BMP's ATGMs off at Charlie from there, before coming back down and picking whatever angle of attack I might like. Alternatively, part of me doesn't fancy the Syrians' chances in an extended engagement. Maybe I need to throw caution to the wind and embrace the Uncon approach of getting stuck in with as much speed and aggression as possible. There are loads of options here. I feel like the Syrian Mechanized Platoon TOE is throwing me a lot more negative options, things I really don't want to do, without providing a clear positive choice though. I don't need to make a decision about what to do right now. We've literally had about 20 seconds of contact. It'd be premature to go all in straight away. As it pans out, things have already gone sideways. The last turn just ended seconds before the effects could manifest. The main body of 3rd was coming up on the left of the scouts to a position where they could throw their firepower at the revealed Marines. The scouts had been engaging them without any problems, but they were also masked from the Charlie compound by some trees. The rest of 3rd, only a few meters to their left, is in full view. As they run up, they come under fire from a small team on one of the roofs. The squad leader, machine gunner and one of the riflemen are taken out in short order. The rest of the squad, including the scouts, go to ground, break, and then run back towards their BMP. It looks like the scouts managed to hit someone in the enemy platoon HQ, but that hardly compensates for 3rd squad getting rinsed. I should have clocked the potential firing angles, and I didn't, but the worst part is that I'm in the same position of being unsure how to proceed that I was in a minute ago. I just have 13% fewer dismounts. I can at least supplement my prevarication with some violence, so I pull the entire platoon back to Bravo, where the BMPs will line up on the summit overlooking Charlie and start to shoot up the buildings. The intent here is to inflict casualties and degrade the enemy. The rooftop with the confirmed small team on eventually collapses, which at least denies that particular position to the enemy, but I have other problems. Despite being a good 600 meters away from the Charlie compound, the BMPs start to take small arms fire. This is probably from at least one Marine rifle team in the woods. They're trying to plink the gunners out as they operate the ATGMs. So I pull the BMPs back a little bit and dismount the infantry to join in with some speculative RPGs and maybe, if I'm very lucky, actually spot something. I am not lucky. I am in fact unlucky. Not only is the infantry fire comically inaccurate and ineffective, the gunner of 3rd's BMP gets doped. I can't replace him in combat mission, so that's that vehicle reduced to a box on tracks. This is clearly not going very well. I do at least have a possible location for the offending Marines. It looks like the fire was coming from the right corner of the Charlie Woods, just opposite the turnoff over the river that leads to the compound. That's a position I think I can tackle without exposing my platoon to possible small fire from the buildings. In fact, approaching from the north, there's a 300 meter wide stretch of open ground along the highway the BMPs can use as a fire lane to suppress the edge of the woods, while the dismounts flank on the left via the cover of a stream bed. That would lead them back into the woods where 3rd got hit, but I'm relatively confident the closer side of that is clear. With a bit of luck, there's just one isolated Marine fire team on that corner and I'll be able to overwhelm it. Getting into position is straightforward. There's plenty of room to manoeuvre. What's left of 3rd squad head down the stream bed in their BMP, given that it can't contribute to the fire support anymore. The other BMPs drop their dismounts to follow and then head right into a wood next to the highway. Everyone is in position after a few turns, and both the infantry and BMPs move forward into firing positions to engage. They don't spot anything, and there's no obvious return fire. Somebody is shooting back. I can just about hear some M16 shots, but I can't place them with any certainty. Third heads off to the left and crosses into the wood without any problems. From there I should be able to probe along the edge, clear it, and then work the rest of the dismounts in. While they're doing that, First finally makes the spot on the shooting Marines. The other small team is on the roof of C2, the one next to the building with the now collapsed roof. They trade fire, both small arms and rockets. None of the rockets hit, and several of them pre-detonate on the intervening trees, causing third to go to ground again. This is really a very isolated firefight. All the fire is going back and forth through a relatively narrow keyhole. It's clear that first space of fire team isn't going to be able to get much done, so I bring second's BMP up to support. That puts an ATGM in there. Then the gunner spends an agonising 40 seconds reloading it instead of engaging with the coax. This TAC-AI behaviour is a CM-ism that is not done with us yet. But eventually the gunner drops back down and the small team falls in a hail of machine gun fire. That clears up that particular angle and one of the small teams. It's obvious by now there is no Marine team on the corner, but attacking here has at least gotten me into the wood. This seems clear as well, at least so far. It'll make a good jumping off point for the dismounts to clear the rest of it, and get into better positions to deal with the Charlie compound. The BMPs can offer some support from longer range via angles down the highway, or be relocated further afield as necessary. First off though, I know the Marine HQ is at the other end of the wood, so I send second off to try and deal with them, keeping a wary eye on the compound. Third has occupied the corner, and I'd send them dashing across the road into the ditch to both open another avenue of attack and make room for first as they approach. Third takes a casualty on the way over. It's difficult to tell exactly where the fire came from. Meanwhile, second bumps into the enemy platoon HQ. They lose 2 men in the initial contact, then manage to manoeuvre and finish the lone Marine off. By now I'm definitely getting a contact icon over in building C3. Presumably the small team on the roof there has gone downstairs. I want to get rid of them, so seconds start to crawl up to the edge of the highway where they can get eyes on and engage, covered by first, who are off to their right in the wood. First's BMP, meanwhile, has come round the edge of the wood to support them. I'd initially intended to slot it in where third had made first contact, and then hose down the enemy platoon HQ, but it's now also in a good position to pop up and give C3 a quick blast. As it turns out, nobody can actually draw a good line of sight to C3 and engage it properly. There's not only a wall in front of it, but it's a little higher than my positions. To make matters worse, second gets engaged obliquely from the ditch to the compound's right. They're quickly pinned. There's a Marine fire team in there, presumably the ones that shot up third when they crossed the road. BMP number 1 is in position to help out though. With only a little shuffling, it can keep some trees between itself and C3 while it keyholes onto the new target. Coax fire from the BMP tilts this new firefight in my direction, and, with the Marines ducking, second gets stuck in and takes a few out before a 73mm direct hit seals the deal. BMP number 2, meanwhile, has come up alongside first squad. I've brought it in so it can enfilade the ditch, but it's also in a good position to support some exploitation. It pops smoke, obscuring the compound and setting the stage for third to dash across the road in front of them and pile onto the recently deceased Marines. This is a little optimistic. Third again attract fire as they move. There are more Marines further up the ditch, and they force the Syrians back with more loss. The main problem with the ditch is that the BMPs can only effectively engage along its length. I don't want to send my dwindling dismounts along the same fire corridor as a load of 73mm shells, so that avenue of attack is out of the picture. I still need to deal with the compound though, and taking that will get me onto the left flank of the ditch. So while Charlie is still smoked, I run second squad across into the ditch to try and storm the place. They lose another man to the ditch Marines in the process. Then when they try and pop up and over the wall to engage C3, the smoke has cleared enough that the lone Marine in there can shoot one, then drive the rest of them off by firing a thermobaric rocket at them. Adding to the distinct sense of uphill struggle, I've got 1st's BMP shooting up the ditch, and the gunner makes the highly questionable decision to fire an ATGM. Naturally, this gets him shot in the face, meaning that 2 of my 3 BMPs are now practically firepower killed. They can still pop smoke though, which allows 1st to punch over the ditch with some obscuration and get onto the flank of the compound. They shoot C3 up from the side, allowing what's left of 2nd to close in for an assault. The last small gunner gets suppressed, but I have to lift all the fire for 2nd to get inside, and that gives him a window to recover. He shoots another Syrian, 2nd goes to pieces and they run back outside, though the last man turns and throws a grenade that kills the Marine. As if this wasn't strenuous enough, 1st's base of fire team cops a few rounds from the ditch and loses its machine gunner. Evidently the Marines over there can see around the edge of the Charlie buildings. But the compound itself is now clear. 1st and 2nd consolidate on the position, standing by to flank the ditch. The plan here is very simple. The remaining fully functional BMP will keep the ditch suppressed by firing down it, while what's left of 1st and 2nd get up into the 2nd story of building C1, where they can fire down into it. The 2 survivors of 3rd on the right flank will edge forwards and see if they can take advantage of any opportunities that present themselves. One key problem with this is that 2nd's BMP is out of coax ammunition. Evidently 1500 rounds is not enough. I have at least taken a moment to pull it back and fire its remaining ATGM off, so I don't have to run the risk of the gunner sticking his head up instead of using the 73. Unfortunately for 1st, the 73mm gun alone is not very effective. When they pop up to engage the Marines, they're met with a hail of 5.56 and 40mm grenades. The 2 remaining Marine fire teams are down there, and they're simultaneously not happy and actually pretty well screened from the BMP by a small footbridge. I don't have any better ideas right now though, so I keep at it. The 2nd time they pop up, they lose another 3 men in the break, but they're keeping enemy attention off the BMP, which manages to grind the leftmost Marine team down with repeated near misses. 3rd is sneaking up on the other side of the ditch with an eye to exploiting the suppressive effect, but when they close in, the Marines just grenade them. That's 3rd completely wiped out. The rest of the dismounts aren't doing much better. There's only 1 man still standing from 2nd, and while 1st's assistant team leader is still going, the platoon commander is actually trying to surrender now. Having a force that's been reduced to 2 functioning but currently uncontrollable dismounts and 1 combat-capable BMP that's rapidly running out of ammo is not exactly a recipe for success. There can only be 2 or 3 Marines left now though, so I decide I'm going to expend all of BMP number 2's remaining 73 rounds at them and then call it a day. So I roll the BMP right into the ditch to get a better angle and start blasting. This actually works, which is much more of a surprise than it should be thanks to how this battle has panned out. On hitting ceasefire, the Syrians have indeed neutralised all 19 enemy soldiers, though at the cost of 21 Syrian casualties. All that's left are 3 dismounts and 4 crewmen, 3 drivers and a gunner. In terms of points, the attacking platoon got their 1000, but the Marines inflicted 405 points worth of damage, giving the Syrian Mech Infantry a grand total of 595 points. They crawl into last place on the list after the Uncons on a comparatively mighty 829. As always, the points are arbitrary. They're only really useful because everyone is being measured on the same scale. We got some other data points to consider as well. This took 63 minutes, so over an hour, the longest so far. The dismounts sustained 86% casualties, and although there were technically no vehicle losses, 2 of the 3 BMPs were functionally neutralised. That's by far the worst performance we've seen so far in the platoon patrol, and I can tell you that it definitely felt like the worst performance so far. Some of that poor performance is directly combat mission related. For whatever reason, the tech AI was excessively keen to use ATGMs when it was area firing. For the BMP-1P in particular, this involves the gunner opening up to operate the launcher, which leaves him very vulnerable. Losing 3rd's BMP gunner was the result of a calculated risk when I was firing at Charlie from the Bravo summit, I specifically wanted to use the ATGMs, and although there was some small arms fire coming in, I judged that it was unlikely to score a hit at 600 meters. Losing first's BMP gunner was the TAC-AI deciding to use the ATGM against a patch of ground 200 meters away instead of using the 73, which is what it had been doing up to that point. Granted, it is possible to work around this kind of TAC-AI behaviour by conducting pop-up attacks that would limit the amount of time the gunner would be exposed if he made that particular terrible decision, but it's an extra layer of game engine-induced complexity to deal with. And this is a very vehicle-dependent technical point. The BMP is one of the few IFBs that has a one-man turret. In other vehicles, the commander could take over his position if he was killed. Even worse, this is one of even fewer IFBs where the gunner needs to pop out the hatch to operate one of the weapons. I think it's safe to say that the end game would have gone a lot smoother with twice the BMP firepower on hand. Despite that, I was a little surprised that they all survived. A couple of s'mores, 84s and 40mm grenades did go their way, but nothing connected, probably due to a combination of luck and my ability to keep them at arm's length. The downside to that, though, was the fact that there wasn't really that much cooperation between the BMPs and the infantry. In the first contact, I judged the BMPs were too close and vulnerable to the s'mores in Charlie to engage. Firing from Bravo, the infantry basically contributed nothing. Switching onto the right flank was pretty textbook IFBs shooting infantry onto an objective. There just weren't actually any enemy there. And it wasn't until I really got stuck into the Marines holding the ditch that the BMPs got their time to shine, and then they were quickly reduced to one combat-capable vehicle rapidly running out of ammo, while they conspicuously didn't support the infantry attacking the compound buildings, except with smoke. Even though 2nd's BMP was ultimately the decisive factor in finishing off the Marines, it took a long time, used a lot of ammunition, and it wasn't supposed to be the decisive element. My intention was for the BMP to suppress the enemy so that the dismounts in Charlie could finish them off. Instead, the BMP ground the Marines down by a kind of shrapnel-based death of 1,000 cuts. They were never fully suppressed, and as a result my infantry got chewed up. The 73 is just not a very effective weapon for engaging infantry. The coax had a lot less ammo than I thought it had, and it's hard to tell exactly what the ATGMs achieved, except getting 2 of the gunners killed. It has to be said that a major component of the problem here was the terrain. Attacking Charlie from the east or northeast means attacking into and through that wood running along the highway. From there, the next set of potential enemy positions were at very short range across the stream in the compound and in the ditch, both of which were awkward areas to target. This made it both difficult to find good angles for the BMPs and put them in close proximity to the enemy where I was acutely aware of their vulnerability to AT weapons. Coming in from the other side of Charlie, I suspect the BMPs would have been able to do a much better job of acting as a base of fire for the dismounts. Obviously, the fact that the BMPs found it difficult to support the infantry meant that they had a much harder job. Every time the dismounts got into contact with the Marines, they took losses. First squad melted away on the upper floor of C1 trying to shoot down into the ditch. Second lost a couple of men mopping up the Marine HQ team in the woods before taking casualties reaching and clearing the Charlie compound. Third was cut down to half strength 30 seconds into the first contact, gradually shrank as I manoeuvred them around, and finally went out in a shower of hand grenades. In almost all of those instances, they were engaged at close range by better trained, better motivated and better armed Marines who were either unspotted, unsuppressed, or both. On the one hand, I should make it clear that any unit is going to take casualties fighting against an opponent with those advantages on this terrain. On the other hand, the key problem the Syrian Mech had was that they just didn't have the numbers. Mechanized infantry of all types are generally plagued by low body counts. Once you start putting bigger and more exciting weaponry on your vehicles, you reduce the number of passengers they can carry and you end up with smaller squads. In theory, the increase in firepower compensates for the decrease in dismounts. In practice, there's a multitude of battlefield situations where dismounts can find themselves operating without effective support from their vehicles. A further twist of the knife for our Syrian mech is that they are comparatively lightly armed as well. Typical NATO-style mechanized infantry have multiple machine guns and grenade launchers down at squad level, along with important enablers like optics and night vision, and the Syrians have 1 PKM, 1 RPG and iron sights. It's not impossible that First Squad could have overwhelmed the Ditch Marines in the final stages of the battle if they had had a similar armament. But with their PKM gunner out of action, they were basically putting 6 AKs against 6 M16s, 2 SAWs and 2 M203s. That's not a level of firepower they could really compete with. In some respects though, for all its disadvantages, the approach through the woods actually helped here. The dismounts only ever got into a real firefight once, right at the end. In the other contacts, in the woods or at the compound, they were fighting at such close range that AKs and hand grenades were all they really needed. Beyond the nitty-gritty of the pointy end, another key element of the Syrian mech run was how indecisive my perception of the platoon's vulnerabilities made me. I've played so much shock force both as and against Syrian BMP units that I know how quickly they can disintegrate on contact. So when I stumbled into the Marine HQ near Charlie, I looked at the terrain and decided that attacking from there meant I was sending my dismounts into the woods and separating them from their vehicles, splitting their already limited firepower and exposing them to defeat in detail. But ironically, I was there in the first place precisely because of the way that terrain would let me close in on Charlie and check if it was occupied without exposing the entire platoon. I had looked at the avenue of approach I actually used, basically going down the highway, and I decided not to go that way because it looked too risky. Not only was there a lot of open, exposed ground, but thinking about moving on from Charlie towards Echo, I would either have to drive through Charlie, between the woods and the compound, or go around the woods at relatively close range. Now both of those options scream ambush. It might have been smarter to probe Charlie via the highway because any incoming fire would be more likely to come from longer range and therefore be less effective, but that's no consolation for that lucky small hit that wipes out a third of the platoon. So, at least as I approached it, there's some interesting tension here. It felt like the Syrian Mechanized demanded one style of approach to find the enemy without incurring too much risk, but a radically different one to maximize the platoon's limited firepower in the actual attack. It's easy to say in hindsight that the wood was unoccupied and my infantry could have moved in without any problems, taken out the small teams on the compound roofs and created the conditions the BMPs needed to close in and support. But with the layout of the defence unclear, I think attacking from another angle was probably the best choice, and the right offered a longer range buffer than the left. Again, a bit like the infantry dynamic in this fight, these are not problems specific to Syrian Mechanised infantry. This is primarily a terrain problem, so every unit attacking Charlie from this angle is going to face similar issues. Everything is just worse for the Syrians because of the limitations imposed by their ToE. So, that is the Syrian Mechanised infantry platoon in BMPs through the grinder. Getting reduced to 3 dismounts and a single combat-capable vehicle is going to be a tough worst performance to displace, though Syrian Reserve Mech in BTRs are still in the mix, and they're basically the same, but worse. It'll be interesting to see if any of the NATO Mechanised infantry suffer from similar problems, and if their advantage in firepower will help them out. Group 4 is up next, which gives us a choice between Dutch Mechanised in either CV90s or YPRs, US Mechanised in Bradleys, or Syrian Airborne Mech in BMP3s. So some of the higher end toys in this group. I'll link the poll down below when this goes public so you can all get your votes in. Hope you enjoyed this one and found it interesting. Syrian mech platoons really aren't organised and equipped to operate independently, and boy did that show here. If you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.